Sawdust Studios. I'm Cruz and this is our community woodshop here in Columbia, Missouri. We've created a space where anyone can come learn woodworking, use professional tools, and make something they're proud of. Each video we make has a sawdust kit to go with it, so you can follow along step by step whether you're here in the shop or working from home. If you're in Columbia, come grab a kit, and if you're not, we'll ship it to your door. These tutorials will walk you through projects like cutting boards, charcuterie boards, spoons, and more. Let's get started. All right, so today we're going to be building a charcuterie board. Okay, I've got about a 30-inch piece of black walnut here, which we're in Columbia, Missouri. Missouri actually produces the majority of the world's black walnut, so we're pretty proud of that. It's one of our staples. It's gorgeous wood. We're going to start off with this rough piece of wood. We got to debark it. Okay, anytime we're making charcuterie boards and I'm teaching people to make charcuterie boards, I always tell them you want to debark. The bark looks cool, but it's going to eventually dry and crack and break off. So you might as well just take it off now. That way we have a clean slate to start. We're going to be using a draw knife to do that. I've got 3 or 4 of these in the shop. To be honest, I'd never used a draw knife until I started Sawdust Studios. It was one of my favorite tools, and then kind of went on the hunt for some nicer ones. My dad found me this antique one in an auction, so it's really sharp. It does a great job. We're going to move it over to that vise, get this guy clamped down, and we'll get it debarked for you. Follow me over here. All right, we got this guy clamped up, and I'm going to debark it. When we're debarking, or we're going to use the draw knife, I want to line up with the angle of the wood, the outside of the tree. I want to get in there because if I can get a big bite, I can remove more right off the bat. So I can get right under there. So you got her. And then I'm removing all this, at least as much as I can, the majority of it. And the rest we'll clean up with the sander. But that piece of bark, see how easily it's snapped off? That's because this piece of wood is dried. So even if your bark is stuck on there and it feels like it's never going to come off, it will. Might as well forget about it having bark on it and go ahead and debark it. At least that's my suggestion. You do whatever you want. But yeah, this one side, I'm going to flip it over, I'll do the other side. All right, so I got it flipped over, same thing. See, we already have a little gap, so I'm just going under there and I'm prying. Try to take it off in one big old piece. If I can't, I work around and I'm removing as much of this bark as fast as I can. This table's pretty wobbly. I didn't make it. It's a really handy table, but don't judge me. I'm removing as much of this bark as I can because it's way easier to do it with the draw knife than it will be later. All right, so that's a pretty good place to start. Now we're gonna take this board, we're gonna run it through the planer, and then I'll draw out my, my charcuterie board. All right, we're here at our planer. We have a 15-inch helical head jet planer. I'm gonna raise the head of this, and I'm gonna run this thing through here, okay? So what a planer does is it removes the top of our board using the bottom of our board as a reference. This board is pretty flat. If it had any rock to it, I would shim it to put it through here. So I start with a little gap here, about an 1/8 inch gap, or the size of a nickel, and I'm gonna turn the sheen on. When I turn it on, a roller that's about right under this label is gonna grab the board and start feeding it through, and then my cutter head is way back here, and it'll shave the whole top off my walnut board. And then every turn after that, I'm gonna go about a 1/4 turn of this wheel until I get this side flat, and I'll flip it over and do the other side. Our dust collection's on. I'm gonna open our blast gate and then start feeding her through. This is a first glimpse of what this board's gonna become. I like to jokingly say that this is the first time I get to actually meet my board. All right, this side is flat enough, so now we're gonna flip it over. Now I've flipped it over, we're gonna run this side through. We're almost there. We'll do one more pass to get rid of this right here. So here we have this beautiful piece of Missouri black walnut. This piece in particular was air dried. So we get a lot of deep purples and reds in here that you don't get when you get kiln dried walnut. So the colors, when you kiln dry, they bleed together. So you lose a lot of this sapwood, which I actually really like. I think there's a lot of really cool variation in here, which once we put finish on this, we'll get to see. But now I'm gonna draw my design. For my design, on a longboard like this, I like to give it a nice long handle. And then I wanna get rid of any rough spots. So this bottom's a little rough, so I'm gonna cut straight across here. The live edge, I think, is special. You don't always get a board with a live edge, so I wanna keep as much of it as I can, usually when I'm designing this. So I'm going to give myself a nice long board here, and then I'll draw my handle. For the handle, I like to freehand everything. I think it makes it unique. It's like a piece of art. I'm just going to draw a long handle. It comes down just like that. Again, I'm accentuating as much of this board as possible. I got some cool sapwood, but a lot of this heartwood down here. And if I flip it over to the other side, I have a lot more of that heartwood, which I really like, and it's going to come through this handle. If it was a smaller board, I would want the other side to be the star of the show. That way we have more surface area. But I think this is a good size where you're able to lay out some food and some bread and still have plenty of room. I like my handle design. I can always add a hole so I can hang it. It's up to you whether you want a handle. And then there is times that we do some funky stuff with the bottom here. I usually just like to go straight across. That way when it's standing up on a counter, it stands up nice and straight. If you put a weird angle, it's going to want to tilt over, which this board is big enough that it's not going to fit in somebody's drawer. So it's probably either going to go on a wall or on the countertop. So as you're thinking through design, make sure you're thinking of things like that. It's also a functional piece of art. It's not just there for looks. Now that I've got my design drawn out, we're going to go over to the bandsaw and I'm going to cut this out. So this is our Powermatic 14-inch bandsaw. This has a 1/4-inch blade on it, which is great for these curves. And then it's only a 14-inch throat though, so I got to make sure that as I'm turning, the bigger piece of my board is always hanging off to the right. I don't want to start a cut here and immediately have to stop because I've ran into the side of this. When I'm using the bandsaw, I want to keep my hands out of this little imaginary triangle in front of the blade. Okay, so I'm always moving forward, but I'm keeping my hands out of that triangle. I can be to the side, I can be just in front of the triangle, but I tell everybody, don't ever push with your thumb towards that blade. That is extremely dangerous. So as I'm doing this, I'm always repositioning my hands to a safe place. I never push into the side of that blade. I tell people, imagine that it's a saber, like a lightsaber that cannot move. It actually can, but I want you to imagine that it can't. And you have to push through the front of it in order to make a cut. We'll get started. So you can see, I'm not married to my line. You guys watch me draw it. It's very much arbitrary. So me staying on the line doesn't matter. When I'm running through the bandsaw, it's more important that I'm really smooth, that I'm not stopping and so focused on staying on my line that I form this jagged line that's much harder to sand later. I created a nice smooth line, and I almost just used the line that I drew as a reference point to roughly get the shape of board, which I really like. Before I go over to the sander, I'm going to go ahead and drill out this hole. So we'll go over to our drill press, which is right over there, and drill out a hole. So this is our drill press. We've got 3 drill presses here at Sawdust Studios, and we've got this wall full of bits. I'm going to pick out a Forstner bit. That's roughly about the size of the hole that I drew, which is about 1 inch. This guy right here. So this is 1 3/8 hole. So I'll look at it, and it looks like it'll fit nicely. It's got a good balance. You know, I don't want to make my hole so big that it's the star of the show, but I also want a hole that I can hang stuff from. I'm going to go ahead and install this. And my drill press, the way it works is there's a set of jaws. It's 3 jaws that open and close. So I open it so I can put my bit in there, and then I tighten it down, and I take a chuck key, which ours usually sit on that magnetic wall, and then I tighten this down. Okay. What's nice about this drill press in particular is that it has a laser, which helps me center my pieces. I don't want to start drilling and drill into this. You can see a lot of people have drilled into it. So I'm going to set a sacrificial piece of plywood down first under my piece, so that once I drill through my piece of wood, it just goes into that. And then before I go, I make sure that I'm going to have enough travel to get there, which I'm set up there. And then I put that laser in the center, and then I hold tight. If it's hard for you to hold, we have clamps here. You can always clamp your piece of wood. Just make sure it's not going to hit the bit, and then start drilling. Just nice and smooth. My rough cutout charcuterie board. So we're here at my favorite sander. This is a Grizzly 6" by 80" edge sander. I hardly ever use it for the edge though. I love to carve on this end, which is where I shape out most of my boards. I try to make sure I have a nice big curve so that I can fit it around the circle. If I do a tight radius, I can't fit it there, which makes it a lot harder to sand because this bad boy sands really fast. I'm gonna be working on this end, and I want to make sure I get all the edges that I cut with the bandsaw nice and smooth. When I'm sanding, I'm constantly moving. I don't stop moving. That way I'm not accidentally dipping into my piece. Okay, so I'm gonna keep moving, go all the way around. I'll get all the flat edges, and then I'll clean up my live edge. So anything that I miss when I use the draw knife, I'm gonna go ahead and clean up now. Notice I never stop moving. I'm constantly moving. Anywhere I stop, it'll end up digging in deeper. So I want to make sure I keep moving. My handle is nice and smooth on the outside. I get this edge nice and smooth. And it's very aggressive, so I cleaned it up really nice. And then I'm going to clean up this live edge by tilting this forward. And I just follow the wood. All right, so now we're here at our router. This is a Grizzly router table. We've got a Bosch 2.5 horsepower router, and we've got a 3/8 inch bit. We're gonna round over our board. So the way the router works is it spins counterclockwise. And as it's spinning counterclockwise, we also want to be spinning counterclockwise so that where those 2 points meet, we're pushing against each other, okay? It's really important that we never let the router table pull us. So when this thing is spinning, I'm gonna hold this tight, come in and make contact, and then I've got my perfect silhouette that I've carved out with the sander that router bit is gonna follow. So if I've left this all lumpy, it's gonna give me curves that are also lumpy. But since this is nice and smooth, it's gonna give me a nice smooth curve. I'll do the outside here, I'll flip it over to the other side of the neck, and I'll do this bottom, and then I'll show you how to do the hole. So I turn this on, I come in and make contact with the bearing. And I flip it over. And so now I got my nice neck. I'll do the bottom. So now I've got my bottom and my sides done. I like the live edge, and I touched it up a little bit on the sander. So I'll finish this. I don't want to router it. I think it takes too much away. So I'll finish sanding this to soften these edges. And for this, I'm gonna set my hole over the router bit, rotate counterclockwise. That bit's spinning you the other way, and even if you tell your brain to go this way, it's gonna try to go the other way. So I like people to practice beforehand, go counterclockwise, 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 okay? So when I turn this on, I make contact and go fast, okay? In my experience, going faster is better on the router table. If I go slow, especially with bits that are getting used and abused in our shop, it's more likely to cause burns. If I go fast, it gives me a much smoother, cleaner cut. But now I'm router out. This whole thing is ready to sand. So meet me over at the table and we'll get some sanding done. All right, here we are ready to sand, ready to show off this piece of wood. We kind of got to know it a little bit at the planer. We're gonna get to know it some more now once we're sanding. We use a 5-inch random orbital sander. These are just the Performax. These are the cheap ones from Menards. They do fine for us. They're kind of our workhorse. They do really well. This one's nice because connected to our dust collector. We've got this giant one-eyed dust collector, and it collects over 90% of the dust, which keeps everybody safe when they're here in the shop. When I'm using these, I do want to make sure that I line up the holes when I'm doing it. Starting with 120 grit, and we use 3 grits most of the time in the shop. We use 120, 220, 320. So the 120 is the most important. I go 1, 2, 3, and it's the most important because it's doing shaping still. I'm fixing any imperfections, any snipe I might have gotten from the planer, which I don't know if you can tell with the camera, but there's a little line right there. That's snipe from when it slowed down just a little bit as it went through the planer. I'm going to use the 120 to get rid of that. You can see a clear line from where the live edge starts and where the router went. That needs to be softened. It should all be really soft and kind of organic feeling. So the 120 will take care of that. I'll clean up this neck with it. So when I'm doing this, just like earlier when I was sanding, I never stop moving. The sander doesn't stop moving. I keep moving as I go. I'll sand this side first, the flat side, and then I'll work on the edges, and I'll show you how you do that. So sanding seems a lot easier than it is. It's really important that you keep moving and that you're not just efficient, but you're also economic. Like sanding for the sake of sanding doesn't make any sense. Feeling as I'm sanding, it needs to look good and feel good. It can't feel good but not look right, or look right but not feel right. And they should both be a combination. But once the spot is right, I don't go back to it. I'm economic, so I don't need to resand. Sometimes I watch people sanding and they just keep hitting the same spot over and over. So this part is the easy part because it's flat. There's nothing exciting happening here. The edges on the charcuterie board are really the star of the show, and that's a little bit more difficult. When I'm sanding the edges, I like to hold the board over the edge because I'm going to go from flat up to flat. So I'm doing this 90-degree turn as I'm moving up and down this curve. What I don't want to do is run it at a 45-degree angle back and forth, because you can see the line where I routered, it leaves a little edge. But when I'm running at a 45-degree angle, I'm recreating two new edges, which I don't want. I want this all to be nice and smooth. So I'm moving this way as I move this way, okay? So. I flip it over, I'll do the flat, clean up these rough edges. All right, so I've got this spot where one tooth on my planer hit a little extra, and you can see it across there. So I want to kind of pinpoint that spot to fix it. So when I'm doing this, I like to take my sander and just angle it about 5 degrees, and then I'm going to go down that line. My rule is for every second I have it tilted, I need to run it flat at that spot for a second. So I'm going 5 seconds like this. I got to run flat 5 seconds because I don't want to create a deeper channel. I'm trying to feather that into the rest of the board so that you can't see it later. So I'm angled. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I'm flat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I still got a little bit, so I'll go another 3 seconds and then 3 seconds off. All right, so I was able to get rid of that spot without creating a new spot. So I wasn't just efficient there, I was economic. Once it's fixed, I move on. There's no point in over sanding. Here's another little trick, and it's going to be hard to do here because it's not very big, but I have a little burn. Okay, anytime I have a burn, I want to barely sand it. Like I'm barely kissing it with the sander, because if you push hard into a burn, it just gets bigger and you make it harder. Burns can be kind of a pain, but I want to softly touch it until it goes away. So I have this burn here. I'm just going to hit it really lightly. And now it's gone and I can keep moving. So now I'm done with the machine with the 120. And I like to take the paper off, especially on something with big curves and edges like this. I want to hand sand just a little bit, always with the grain, to make sure that everything feels nice and smooth. There's no sharp edges that are going to catch anybody. The neck, it's hard to get my sander in. I want to make sure and get that nice and smooth. I've got it all sanded up, and I'm going to switch to my next grit, which is 220 grit. So I mentioned earlier the 120 is the most important because it does all the heavy lifting. It gets all this super smooth. So I'm no longer shaping the board now. It's already shaped. The 220 I use to smooth or soften what I've already done. So I can go a lot faster. I just got to make sure I hit the whole board with the 220 to make it a little softer. And if you've probably noticed, there's people in our shop actively using it while we're here. We are a community wood shop. Members get to use this space 24/7. So even while we're shooting our own videos, we have people coming in and using it, which is something that's really important to us. We got Dan back there, we got Amy, Ash is back there building a bowl, his first bowl. It's a pretty cool space, and we're really proud of it. So sorry if it is noisy in the background. There's a lot of people in here, but it's really important to us that no matter who you are, no matter what experience of woodworking, you're going to feel welcome here, and we're going to prioritize you even as we're shooting our videos. That being said, I'm going to move on to 220. I've already done the heavy lifting, so I'm just making sure I hit it with the 220. I want to cover the whole thing. I can work a lot faster here. All right, again, I'm tearing off the 220 and I'm cleaning up. I'm sanding all these edges. Just a quick little once over, make sure you go with the grain. And then I clean up the hole. And I get the question a lot, like, why do you sand to 320? We oil and wax these, and the difference is really big. We sell at local Columbia Farmers Market, best farmers market in the US. And when I started switching to 320, people would touch my boards and I almost couldn't stop touching them. It feels so, it doesn't feel like wood anymore, it feels fake. Your brain almost can't comprehend how smooth it is. So I've got this joke I say that if you're tired of sanding at 220, you're welcome to stop sanding. But when you show this to your friends, they're gonna say, oh, you made this. If you sand at 320, when you hand this to one of your friends, they're gonna say, ooh, you made this? And that's what you want. And we sand at 320, makes a big difference. And it only takes a few seconds longer to do it. I'm gonna go ahead and switch to 320 and get that knocked out real fast. It took a lot of years to get this good at sanding. As I'm doing it, I'm not just, I see what I need and that's all I'm doing. And I'm trying to go as fast as possible. It's a lot like painting a house. Everybody thinks they can do it. There is a lot more to it than meets the eye. Take your time, learn how to do it right, and try to be as efficient and economic as you can. Because, I mean, this video, half of it, at least half of it is the sanding portion. So I could have done a perfect job up until sanding. If I don't do a good job sanding, it doesn't matter. People think you did a bad job. Or I could have done an awful job with everything but the sanding, and everybody thinks you did a good job. Sanding is maybe the worst part of woodworking, but it's also the most important. A lot of life lessons are taught and learned with sanding. Just make sure you're patient, and that's what's going to really make a difference. If you're showing this to your friends and family, you want them to be proud of it. Make sure you spend a lot of time sanding. That being said, now we're going to move on to finish. All right, so now we're ready for finish. We like to use walnut oil for our finish. This is lead Saran gel. I ran to our Gerbs and bought this guy. This bottle is about $10. You can get it everywhere. What's special about walnut oil is that it doesn't go rancid. It allows you to put it on here, leave it, kind of forget it for a while, and it's not going to smell bad. It also smells wonderful, and it's completely food safe. A lot of people online, they use mineral oil, which is food safe, but it is a petroleum-based laxative. So it's not something we want to be putting in our bodies. You know, anything you put on this, because it is going to come in contact with your food, you are going to be eating. So you only want to be putting things on here that you're okay with being in your body. So for us, that's walnut oil. We love it. I've taught thousands of people how to make these, and walnut oil is always our go-to. So step one is to pour a little puddle of this walnut oil. I'm going to grab a clean paper towel. And then, you see, this is really when I get to meet my board. So I can see it. It's there. I can see my baby. I'm going to spread this out, and it's really going to come to life. Okay. I mentioned earlier, this is air dried. So you get some kind of some purples and some reds that come out. I love sapwood. It's a great contrast. I also like to name my boards, and I've been thinking about this one as I've been making it. And I think its name is going to be Darth Vader. Because while it's mostly dark, you can see the light coming through. And he never really went full all the way. And earlier I mentioned the lightsaber, which kind of reminded me of that. So I'm going to keep rubbing this in. Just make sure everything gets covered. And if you've done a crappy job sanding, everything that you left, you know, all the snipe, all the lines, they really pop. I jokingly say, if you leave those, the second I step through your front door, I'm going to see them. So make sure you do take your time when you're sanding. It's really important. But now I've got it fully covered in walnut oil. And I could just leave it like this, but since I did sand at 320, I'm going to go ahead and wax it. So before I wax, I'm just going to wipe it down a little bit. And then I'm going to take this wood wax. We make this ourselves. This is 4 parts walnut oil, 1 part beeswax. And we actually get our beeswax from right here in Boone County, Missouri. But I just put a little dollop. That's probably too much. And I'm spreading it, and I can see it in the light. I'm putting just enough to coat it. I don't want to overdo it because I'm immediately taking the excess off. So anytime you're waxing, it's wax on, wax off. There's a reason that line's in Karate Kid, because that's the proper technique when you are waxing. You wax on, wax off. And the wax kind of fills in all the little voids. Again, it's just beeswax and walnut oil, so it's totally food safe. But it gives this amazing feel. So I've got this thing fully coated. And then I'm going to take this rag, and I'm just buffing it off, okay? Get it all cleaned up. And this is a gorgeous charcuterie board. That would be the star of any party. And it's pretty easy to make. With this video, you should be able to make this in our shop in less than 2 hours, regardless of your experience. Like I said, the piece of wood that I started with, we've got thousands of those. If you want to buy one of those kits, we have those available. I'm happy to ship them all over the country if you need it. And then if you could support us, hit that like button. And thanks for watching.